I'm also a host.
Oh, hello.
Whoa. One of the hosts at Afternoon Tea, and hello to everybody watching. Hello to our audience. As Urban previously mentioned, we are going to have a montage of all of our episodes so far. We do also have Tony, our lovely BSL interpreter, over here. If we could get hands. Well, I'll shut up now. You can watch the video.
Absolutely. I'm excited for that. Great.
Mental health is one of those things that kind of come to you later on in life as you become aware of maybe your stability or instabilities. In today's society, we call it various triggers, etc. You know, various environments bringing out an innate reaction within you, mate, that may not be conducive to sort of like the best outcome that you want. You know, if you're finding yourself troubled just by the...
Or is afternoon tea in general?
Afternoon Tea in general is what you sign up for.
I suppose mental health is one of those things that kind of come to you later on in life as you become aware of maybe your stability or instabilities. In today's society, we call it various triggers, etc. You know, various environments bringing out an inclusive to sort of like the best outcome that you want. You know, if you're finding yourself troubled just by the everyday of life, you know, there's a certain amount of introspection and self-analyzing, I suppose would be the term, to work out why you're feeling the way you do.
I think when I went to school in the 80s and early 90s, there was no mention of mental health. You just had to get on with it. So if you were having a bad time at school, nothing was thought. You just like grow a pair habit and just get on with it. Right. No, it was just one of them ones. Whereas now,
I suppose mental health is one of those things that kind of come to you later on in life as you become aware of maybe your stability or instabilities. In today's society, we call it various triggers, bringing out an innate reaction within you, mate, that may not be conducive to sort of like the best outcome that you want. You know, if you're finding yourself troubled just by the everyday mill of life, you know, there's a certain amount of introspection and self-analyzing, I suppose would be the term, to work out why you're feeling the way you do.
I think when I went to school in the 80s and early 90s, there was no mention of mental health. You just had to get on with it. So if you were having a bad time at school, nothing was thought. You just like grow a pair habit and just get on with it. Right. No, it was just one of them ones. Whereas now, there is a lot more care and attention to mental health. If people are struggling, they've got pastoral support. They've got all these different agencies that they can go to, like Chums and CAMS and all these other different agencies that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they've got so much support. Teachers are talking about it, students talk about it. They've got a junior leadership team that the young mental health can go to. So yeah, so there's a lot more out there. There's a lot more awareness now than there was post-COVID. I think pre-COVID, there wasn't as much attention, but post-COVID, I think it's brought everything to the limelight about mental health.
You mentioned about obviously eating disorders and, you know, the way that social media portrays it and the impact that it has on young women and girls. Do you think you've seen a similar sort of impact when it comes to young boys because of a lot of the pressures when it comes to things like gym, things like protein eating, or there's a lot of gymfluencers, as I believe they're called, who have that extreme dieting process for maximum protein and carbs and stuff like that. Do you see a similar sort of impact in the way that perhaps traditional anorexia and bulimia would affect young women and girls in the way that this gymfluencers affect young boys?
Yeah, for sure. I think that because I'd say it's probably a bit newer, there's less talked about, it's less recognized, but looks maxing, it is horrendous, I think. Wanting to be the best version of yourself, I think this is it kind of gets it gets mistaken for that. It's a fine line between being the best version of yourself and wanting to improve and meditating and going to the gym for your mental health, and actually doing it because you think you need a better jawline to get women. And I think there's a lot of, as you say, toxic influences, gym influencers there's really positive ones who go to the gym and show workouts, which is really good. But it's when it goes over that line of you need to do this and you're a better person externally because you do all of this. And I'm lucky I've not fallen into it where I've got to a stage where I've obsessively gone to the gym, but certainly I've seen and I felt it myself. Like I went for a period where I was looking at how things you can do at home to make yourself better looking and go up that, I think in kind of incel communities higher up on the out of 10. And that kind of feeds into, say, the TikTok shop and these things where, and other like cheap stores where you can buy these looks maxing products for like £5 and they're marketed to kids, which is basically not regulated.
When you, if you don't mind me asking, you going to prison at a young age, how do you think your upbringing might have led to that, and how do you think that's impacted your profession currently?
I think that my upbringing, so when I was young, I think that with kids, I feel like it's not like monkey see, monkey do, but it's kind of like what you're exposed to, you end up subconsciously becoming that or end up getting into that.
Internalizing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that for me, so could you repeat the question?
How has your upbringing sort of affected your profession currently?
So I think like profession now, because it's also given me that experience to kind of like when I'm speaking to young people that might be exposed to certain things. It's something that it's something that I've experienced myself as well. And I'd say that for me, it was a gradual process. So it was like at the ages of 13, 14, it was a small little habits that I used to see that I thought were just normal. And for me, I'd say weirdly enough, it started with me smoking weed. So when I was at 13, I started smoking weed, and that kind of led to kind of open the floodgates to a lot of other things. And then obviously by 16, ended up with a sentence. But I'd say now it's kind of like a weird one, because when I'm working with certain young people, I'm a little bit, and it's a thing where I think that as opposed to just working with a young person, I think it is fundamental to work with the parents as well, and get the parents on board and get them engaged, because if you can give them a little bit of insight as well, because a lot of parents, something that you see happen a lot is a young person will pass away and the parents will be oblivious to what type of person that their child was, and they'll say that he was a good kid or he was this and he was that, but they don't actually know that they were active gang members. Do you know what I mean? And it's just awareness. That's all it is. Do you know what I mean? So,
you sort of mentioned this system that's not quite right yet. Is that, I can imagine there's quite a few number of factors, promoting that fact, but is it the confidence from the young people? Is it how guided and informed these people are within the system? What do you think is making the system not quite right and not just there yet?
Okay.
You're welcome.
So I think there are a lot of factors, like I said, misinterpretation of young people. So let's use exploitation as an example.
Sure.
So many people talk about young people putting themselves at risk. They're engaging in risky behavior. They are taking part in an unhealthy relationship. They don't have understanding. Actually, why are we not flipping it on the head and thinking, actually, that's a young person, and effectively you are still a child, and so let's think about it as that is a child. This is someone that is coercing, taking advantage of another child for their own purpose, for their own means. Why are we saying that young person is engaging in risky behaviours? Because actually that child is the person that's being groomed, that's being exploited, that's being abused. And therefore, how are they engaging in risky behaviours through their own decision making when someone has coerced them to do it? There's a huge misunderstanding around that. And so I think we've come really far in talking about what language we use. We don't use victim blaming language, but actually all of those things still exist. And if you think about even in the press at the moment, you know, there's a lot around child sexual exploitation. There's a lot around trafficking. That language is used is still placing blame on the victims.
Sure.
And I don't even like using the word victims. I like to use the word survivors.
Yeah.
At no point is a child or a vulnerable person ever to blame for anything that's happened. So that's one of the things that I would say definitely around the system. I also think there's a definite piece around the education of those. So even professionals that are in the field, what is their education? What is their knowledge around the subject matter? Do they really get it? And then even if we're talking about the police, when police are doing basic training, they are getting maybe an hour or half a day's training on mental health, an hour, half an hour, and a half day's training on exploitation, on how to work with someone with autism. And then we're sending them out to work in the field and in the streets. And actually, that's not that police officer's fault if they don't feel comfortable and they don't have an understanding in them properly. And all of those things combined, it can show faults in the system as to why the systems aren't working for them.
But you don't know if you don't try it. And I feel that element of scouting, that element of that has been lost. And not just scouting, but I think just in society in general, that like you said, that risk, that factor of what if?
Yeah. I mean, I know I've fallen out of many, many trees throughout my childhood. Some from much higher than you possibly should go. But you talked about, you know, developing this physical autonomy. And I actually have a question for both of you, actually. Do you think that, you know, the development of not even just fine motor skills, you know, wider motor skills, you know, doing these climbing frames, this climbing trees, things like, you know, knife tools and things like that. Do you think that has an impact on developing communication? School can no longer communicate, particularly to dentists, doctors, you know, parents and stuff like that. And they're also being wrapped in bubble wrap. They're not being allowed to experience the bounds of their own, you know, physical prowess. Do you think that essentially hindering that physical prowess, wrapping them in bubble wrap, do you think that directly impacts those verbal skills, those communication skills as well?
You could say that, yeah, because one of the factors in learning how to communicate is mixing with your social group. You know, like example, Simon, not that you should do this, but back in the day, Simon would be on the garage roof and he'd jump from the garage roof onto the lamppost to slide down off the roof. Crazy stuff, but that was kind of the play. Now, Simon did it twice and then fell off the third, okay? And it hurt, right? Now, Simon, then you go out and say, Simon, how did you do that? And he said, well, there was a risk. You see, what happened was I did this and the third time I tried to do it this way and that didn't work. Now, all of a sudden, there's shared information through Simon's failure. In that kind of environment, maybe that is an extreme example, but you're not then having that line of communication. You're not having that conversation with your peer group.
Yeah.
Or your class group, you know.
Circle.
Your circle.
Yeah.
There's always that lack or the void of the lived experience. You know, every single one of us, you know, are born incapable of practically doing anything. You know, anybody with a toddler will see that, you know, they start off trying to hold their head up and their head's right? And then they start crawling.
Yeah.
Right? And then they start walking. They're standing up on a piece of furniture. Now, you couldn't do that straight away. You fell on your bum half a dozen times. An awful lot.
Yeah.
And life is like that as you're growing up. So if you're taking the child away from that learning environment, it's not getting the input from other individuals that are going through the same process.
Exactly. So what do you think we can do?
As a society, I think educators, I think we should make it mandatory for every educator to do that kind of understanding of mental health. Same with coaches. I think they need to learn about mental health because you notice a difference. Like when you're in a classroom you got certain school behavior policies, classroom policies that you need to abide by. But then when you go out from education and into a sporting, like as a coach, you notice a difference. You'll notice a child that won't behave at school, but when it comes to play cricket or a sport that he or she is passionate about, you'll see a difference
In the element.
They'll thrive.
in their character. And I think if everyone learned about mental health, and because I've seen it on both sides, from inside the classroom and outside the classroom, you notice a massive shift in attitude, self-confidence, self-beliefs. And I think if we all taught one another, and if we all learn about mental health and about how they're feeling, and I think we need to understand how to regulate ourselves as well as adults. Because if I have a negative, say I'm having a bad day, for example, I'm not thinking like car broke down in the morning, like printer's not working, I haven't got my worksheets printed, and I'm just having this dreadful day. And young people notice that, like, this guy's off today.
Yeah.
What's wrong with him?
Gosh, we spilled the tea, haven't we? I need to go refill my cup. Before you go, if you like what we're doing and you want to support us, please have a chat with us at
Afternoon tea at YouthTV.co.uk.
like stick the kettle on, and we'll catch you in a bit.
See ya.
Thank you guys very much for listening to that. If you want to see more, then episode 7 is now live, I believe.
Absolutely is, yes.
So you can go ahead to the channel and check that out if you want. And we have our lovely panelists with us here. Do you want to go and introduce yourselves?
So I'm Fearless Charity, the Daniel Swaggin Maths Foundation.
I'm Hayley Brown. I'm the Chief Executive of a charity called Linked Change, and we support children and young people that have fallen victim to child exploitation.
My name's Carl Wardle. I'm the Managing Director of a CIC that prides himself on teaching young individuals transferable skills, moving from doubt, denial, distraction, deletion and all that jazz into their perceived better selves.
Yes, I'm Urban Judge and I'm the Group CEO of YouthTV.
Great. Well, as you guys can tell, afternoon tea is not an easy subject. We do talk about quite a few things, and hopefully that snapshot and having our guests here can show you the impact we're obviously potentially going to have to young people, and especially means quite a bit to us. But I think we have a few questions for our guests, and we also have some audience questions later on.
So, which one of us is starting? I feel quite official having these little cue cards here. Right, first one. What's something about young people that's often misunderstood? Just jump in there, one of you.
Hunger Games.
I have a tendency to hog the mic, so that's why I'm refraining on talking
Go for
first,
it,
to be
go for it.
honest.
But you didn't, did you?
No,
You didn't refrain
exactly.
at all,
You're
did
in
you?
there.
Something most often misunderstood. Everything. I do feel that there is a lot of misinterpretation around how young people perceive and how other people perceive them. I think that people tend to see a group of young people in the street and think automatically that they are causing problems, that they're up to no good, and I think half the time that couldn't be further than the truth. I'm waiting for someone else to step in before I carry on rambling.
And one of the things that I've observed is the presumption of a lack of depth. Because of the younger generations live by their devices and use shortwave acronyms and everything else to explore how they're feeling, once you actually do have a conversation, they lack the verbal skills really to explore their depth. But just a bit more time than your average conversation, you'll realise there's a lot more going on than they're capable of expressing.
I can pick that up as well then, because I think sometimes young people, what really annoys me when there are phrases like snowflake generation, and there's this idea that young people are inherently selfish or self-interested or quite egotistical and quite shallow, like you're saying, but young people are amazing. There's this incredible passion and intensity of focus on what the world, how the world should be, how we can make things better, feeling that they need to be part of it, feeling frustrated that adults around them have messed things up in the way that they have. Visionary nature of young people is often overlooked, and they're not given the space to breathe into that either.
I want an opinion of a young person.
Yeah.
I think, I can't speak for everyone because I feel like I'm a bit different. Not in a weird way. In a way that's like, in a way that's like, I was never allowed to slack. The expectation was that I was doing something like good with my life.
I think there's a lot of pressure. I think there is a lot of pressure on young people to be a certain way, to act a certain way, to do a certain thing. And I do think that there is a divide, but I don't think it's an intentional divide. I think it's a divide of misunderstanding that kind of means that, if I think there's something around respect, and throughout my years of working with young people, I often have heard the word respect. Oh, we're not respected, teachers don't respect us, parents don't respect us, and it would be going into a whole conversation about how that works both ways. So I am flipping it back and saying I think there's a misunderstanding in terms of what respect means as well.
I'd like to highlight, you may be right, but I was having a conversation with one of the hosts' relatives earlier on, and it's about the importance of a point that we made on the podcast, the first episode, about that bridge that is required with the older generations and the younger generations. There was a gap for a long while back in my generation where individuals got together and they talked, especially for the young males, etc. It was the pub. And nowadays the pub has died a death for the past few decades. It doesn't side had increased, from where young gentlemen would speak to older gentlemen and get some insight on life. Then there was that gap for a decade or two, but with the dawning of networks like this and the technological age, you're seeing older generations and younger generations coming into that digital theatre and having those conversations that would have been had in the pub some years ago or in the youth club some years ago that's finding common ground. So I can only applaud you, really, for doing what you're doing, because it does bridge that gap of the lack of communication.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, amazing.
I'm just going to move this bottle because I feel like it's in the way, and I'd just like to tell everyone it is water, not to worry.
Well, to me, highlights there's trust. There's something about trust. Is it the lack of trust? But how can we rebuild that trust? I feel either the generational gap we're talking about or the peer gap we're on about. How can we rebuild that trust element?
I think you just have to be nice. You just have to be... There's a lot of... And I don't know if people would agree with me or not, but especially when there's adults who think they're... And I'm sorry. There's adults who think they're better than us or better than young people. And it's like, I think what you're saying, Cole, is there's like that kind of mutual respect that's needed. And I assume that we are, as young people, afraid of... Not afraid of the adults, but... And I mean, I'm 19 now, so I can't really speak for, really under 18s. But when I was younger, it's all dependent on the individual. It's never dependent on just one person. Like, you can't stereotype one young person, because even in the room, there are so many people, and some of the, teenagers in the room who are all different in their own way, and, have respect. And I think there's just this negative connotation of young people in general, and no one gives anyone the chance to,
No, I was going to say what you were saying about that intergenerational connectedness, which is so important. And I think trust comes with just knowing each other and communication, listening, understanding that maybe some of your preconceptions are wrong, and some of the fears that you might have a long time ago in my former life, before I started a charity, I was working with quite vulnerable families, and there was a project that was set up that was getting young people to work with older people around digital literacy and helping them to understand what they needed to do with their mobile phone and tablet stuff. It was a really lovely thing. But the young people were really nervous about the older people. They thought they would judge them, they thought they'd be really rude, they thought they'd be disrespectful. And all the things they were saying were exactly the kinds of things that the older people might say of teenagers. And it was such a lovely thing to bring them together on a project together and get to know each other and find that on both sides they didn't need to feel that. They could feel, because they could trust them, they could feel safe, they knew them, and I think it is just relationships are so key. And what you're saying about being kind, assume the best unless you're proved otherwise. There is always good in everybody. There's, if you go into any kind of encounter, find it. If you look for something terrible, you'll find that as well, probably most of the time. But yeah, assume the best.
Thank you.
No.
I'm just going to fire off another question. I think we're on a roll here. Why do some young people feel disconnected from institutions like policing or services?
Wow.
That's a heavy one. We're getting right into it.
That, again, is one of those multifaceted questions that requires a multifaceted approach. You know, not just the urban lifestyle, it comes down to social and personal dynamics, one of financial environment, one of your academic environment, what's your peer group environment. As you see, the crimes differ not only through the financial bracket, but they differ through the education and class bracket. The type of crimes, the type of wayward distractions that somebody or a youth is looking for differ vastly from their social group. So again, you need to cultivate what is called the field marshal's approach, where you're no longer in the trenches, you're looking at a much bigger tapestry of the social environment. And the moment you can understand an individual's social environment and their personal dynamics, that's when you can structure a pattern or a system to negate and travel and traverse those complexities. You see, it's not just one solution. You know, what's right for Bill isn't necessarily right for John, and vice versa. You know, it's I think there was a term that was going, or contextualized approach, where you're looking at the individual factors of the ingredients within the batch, so then you can work out what kind of food you're cooking.
I've done some fantastic pieces of work in the past where restorative justice pieces where we've worked with the police and a group of young people. And typically within that group of police officers were the police officers that had a certain perception of young people, didn't really trust in them, didn't have great relationships with them. And we also had groups of young people that felt the same about the police. And it was a really powerful piece of work when you bring them together and do mediation and build upon point, because actually we knew by, if we were to tell young people we're going to put you in a room full of police officers, then probably the types of young people we wanted to attend wouldn't turn up. So we just told them that we had an activity that was going on. We had police come, they were in plain clothes, they were not in uniform, and actually every time I delivered that piece of work over several years, it was really strong and really powerful, because what we managed to do was get the young people and the police to build relationships with each other outside of knowing what this young person has done in the past historically in terms of criminality, what this police officer, that this adult was a police officer, because they were getting to know each other as a person rather than in that perceived institutionalized way that they are and they act. And so for me, that was a really good, and as I always go on about, education is a really key thing. And that was a really powerful educational piece of work that I think it was really powerful. We'll understand each other as individuals rather than who it is that they are and who they represent.
And in the world of drug education, sometimes it's police that are going into schools and delivering drug education, and that's quite tricky because some police officers are brilliant at doing that, some aren't, but for many young people there is an immediate barrier in listening and hearing what somebody wearing a uniform or even not wearing a uniform going in that role is going to say. But from the other side, because we do a lot of work with the police as well, it's really difficult because they want to be able to say stuff to young people about how they can keep themselves safe if they do use something. They can't have that kind of conversation. So there are, I mean, that's an incredible project. Is that understanding, better understanding on both sides. But there are times and places, I guess, but especially in London, there's such a, the relationship between police and young people is very problematic at the moment, isn't it? And there's a lot.
So you talk about feeling safe, and obviously young people trying to feel safe. And Bedford, for example, we have, Bedford Giving and 1YMCA trying to create these safe spaces. How can we, what does a safe space mean to a young person these days? Is that just a youth hub? Is that having that one peer they go to? That open door. What does it mean for a young person to be safe these days?
I think there's a lot of things that young people can get involved in at school, and then it's like with me, I'm not going to lie, so my school was down the road from here, and I lived in another town, technically, and all my friends were here, so I was kind of on my own, so I can't really speak in terms of going out senior for me. I think it was more like year 11, kind of when you had more responsibility to go out than you could, but also you were doing your GCSEs, so shouldn't have really gone out. But what I think it is there's, where I live, there's a skate park, and it's just all young people do down there. So I walk past to get home, and all they're doing is smoking. And I'm not trying to say that, well, smoking's not good for you, is what I'm going to say.
UTV doesn't endorse smoking,
no, we don't
guys.
endorse smoking. But people do what they want to do, and everyone makes their own minds. And again, back in the day, I made my own mind up because of personal experience. Unfortunately, and I don't know if you three would agree, unfortunately, something may have to happen in life for someone to realise that it is, there are some people who would listen. Some people would listen and go, oh, actually, no. But there are some people, unfortunately, who would, well, if it will happen to me, and then when it does.
A safe space is what you create, essentially, in terms of a safe space. In my opinion, I think each young person is different, and we can talk about creating safe spaces, but it's all on an individual basis. I mean, I even know, not as a professional, but being a mum, when you're trying to have a conversation with your teenage child, and you're like, this is a safe space, like this conversation, this is a safe space, and they would laugh at me. But it really is so different, because what could, as a professional, what we could consider to be a safe space is not what a young person is going to consider. So we could say, actually, we're going to go and meet them in the schools, we're going to go and meet them in the cafe, in the park, we create safe spaces. But actually, until you get to know that individual, you don't know what their safe space is, you don't know where that safe space is. So it's really hard to kind of say we create safe spaces, because we don't know if we are creating a safe space.
I was going to say something very similar. It will mean different things for different young people. It is really, really important that there are places that young people can be together and do stuff that is safe for them. And the redevelopment of youth hubs and youth centres and after so many were closed down over many years. But that won't feel safe. I mean, same for school. For some young people, school is their safe place because home isn't particularly safe. But for other young people, school is not safe. That's a place where then they don't feel safe. They feel that they don't. There's a lot of threat and risk to. We do a lot of work with parents through our drug education charity and talk to parents about having conversations with their children. You know, all of that about drugs. Which can feel really awkward, but we talk about that. I know you say they laugh at you, but that thing about being their safe place to come back to as much as you possibly can. That message that you can throw anything at me. I may not react very well in that moment. Forgive me, but you can never throw anything at me that will mean that I don't want to know about, and that I will not want to support you through. So trying to do that in your role as a parent or a carer with a young person. But yeah, physical spaces, but I agree, I mean, it's different for different young people. So having those options, really important.
You're waiting on me. This is one of those questions that I try to avoid. I really do. My personal experience, I won't go much into, but even those safe spaces have turned out to be rather unsafe. As like life, at any moment, comforted, nurturing place that you wholeheartedly believe that this is your Shangri-La, I'm good here. And at the roll of the dice, the most barbaric upheaval can take place, and that idea of what was safe is then shattered. So what I have had the tendency to do over the years is teach an individual, one, that rather uncomfortable truth that, you know, anything can happen at any given moment, and to be neurologically and psychologically and emotionally prepared for the sharp left or right that life can throw at us unexpectedly, and how to process maybe the shock of that sudden change or unfortunately that upheaval that one has to endure. So again, it comes from a very sort of like different approach than one of yourselves. It's rooted in real world experience, I suppose, and I would dexterity to handle those pitfalls that life can throw at us.
I do have to say, sorry, you know, we're talking about safe places, and one thing that might make you guys laugh is that the buses around here have now started saying, "This is a safe space." Right. It's
a good initiative. I mean, it's not a bad initiative to have.
It's a bus. A bus.
Buses can be unsafe spaces for some people.
Very much, yeah.
Can be safe spaces.
Public transport can be unsafe or safe spaces.
I was just, in our context, I thought that was quite funny.
It'd be interesting to know what they're doing to make that a universally safe space.
Why is it a safe space?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that you mentioned, obviously, you said about these youth hubs and stuff, and obviously, you know, at the moment, because of the lack of them, it's causing this antisocial behaviour of young people. They're out doing what they would normally do in a youth hub, but because it's outside disturbing one or two people, it can be antisocial behaviour. And obviously we've talked quite a bit about this because of being funded by the PCC, the grassroots. You know, we've talked about all of this, you know, things going on. What can we do to stop this antisocial behaviour so that...
Can I just say, us as young people need to know what that is.
Yeah,
we don't understand. We never got told in school what antisocial behaviour is.
You just get told, don't do antisocial behaviour, don't do this, don't do that. You know, antisocial behaviour is bad, you will get an antisocial behavioural order. But we're never actually told what it is. And if you look at the definition, you can look at it on Wikipedia, you can look at it on Oxford Dictionary, or you can look at it on the policing websites per county. And it's basically just defined as disturbance, loitering.
That's worked with antisocial behaviour.
Me too.
Again, it is different depending upon the individuals and the different things. I, you know, have sat in the police local authority meeting, the antisocial. And there can be the extreme of antisocial behaviour, say someone is in the park, they're setting fires, they're being destructive,
that's definitely antisocial
taking
behaviour.
drugs, you know, all of those different types of things. And it can go from being at one extreme, you know, to someone's loitering outside the shop because young people have got nowhere else to go. So actually there's a group of young people, they might be laughing, they might be joking, they might shake a can and spray it or whatever, and that in itself is classed as antisocial behaviour. There is such a huge range and variance in terms of what antisocial behaviour is and what people deem it to be, I guess.
You're on the money, really, with this kind of vague idea of constructed and permitted behaviour. It's something that we all struggle with, especially if you're from the estates or the more heavy populated cities. You know, you'll have your tribe, you'll have your peer group, and you can all get away with bedlam, fundamentally, run havoc on the... For that to be normal because everybody's doing it, there is no real complaints, etc. And then let's just say that you go, at the off chance, you've got a family trip and you've gone to see a relative that lives in one of the more leafy suburbs or the rural areas, and you carry on the same behaviours that you've done every day for the past 2 years on the estate, and then all of a sudden you're being pulled over by the police and being charged with antisocial behaviour. So the question stands, what is antisocial behaviour? And one of the things that we can begin to learn as young adults, something I had to learn quite quickly, is that the consequence for action, once you understand, especially in reintroducing that communication with peer groups and older individuals, you get to understand the subtle nuances of an area, an estate, a social taboo, and it's peer groups that you begin to learn, actually, you know, if we do this round here, that will upset, you know, Mrs. Jones or Ethel and, you know, the old lady's guide dog, etc. You know, maybe kicking the football up against the side of a house ain't the best thing. But again, it comes down to the personal awareness as each and every one of us as individuals being responsible for our actions, having that depth of awareness, like, is my behaviour in this environment conducive to everybody's well-being, or am I going to upset people, even though that this behaviour is quite happily high-fived on the estate? It's about communication and an awareness of the environment in which you're acting up in the first place. Yeah. And that, the last kind of point I'll make on antisocial behaviour is, for centuries and for as long as human beings have been here, kids will be kids. We've all, well, because you're 19. I've been 19, I've been 15, I've been 14. And one thing that we've all got in common, regardless to social or personal dynamics, children will go through a state of delinquency. It's about pushing the rails, finding out who you are as an individual, setting the norms, finding out where the societal line is, you know, with the accepted behaviour. And as adults, there's a certain amount of responsibility on our back to recognise that kids will be kids, but we also have to define at what point are you overstepping the line.
And also what I think you were saying, Hayley, about understanding and not misinterpreting behaviour. So if kids there's a whole bunch of teenagers, maybe they got their hoods up, maybe they're being a bit loud and a bit physical.
Boisterous?
Boisterous,
yeah.
That's the word. They're not a threat. They're just, that's just how they are. But for other people to understand they're not a gang, they're not going to get out of the knife and do anything, you know, it's okay, but that's that intergenerational understanding and not making assumptions as well. But I do think there's a lot to be said for creating spaces too. There was an amazing, we did quite a lot of work in the northeast of Scotland, and there was a lovely, and with the police, with a brilliant project where there was some kids, there's a Tesco's in Aberdeen City, and a car park underneath, and there was a lot of, proper antisocial behaviour, the kind of things like that end of stuff, with teenagers hanging out there. And this brilliant police officer, Derek Bain, he kind of got chatting to them. He sort of youth outreach in his role. And they were really just bored. And he started out working with Tesco's, and I think the first thing he did was just got them all access to Tesco's Wi-Fi, so they could do other stuff rather than just kind of, they could do whatever they could do, you know. And then from there, Tesco's funded some, like an actual space where they could do stuff in and just be, not hanging out in a car park.
That's
Because
amazing.
they didn't particularly want to hang out in a car park either. It's just there wasn't anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it was a really creative approach to, again, that was police then
Yeah.
taking the going on in that behaviour, not just responding to the behaviour, but understanding that the behaviour was communicating something that could be done about.
I'm definitely going to have a look at that movement when I go home. Sounds very, very interesting. Well, it brings it back to that idea of like safe spaces again, doesn't it? You know, about creating a safe space. What is a safe space? I mean, we've said many times on the podcast, we have tried to make afternoon tea a safe space. We can talk
Openness,
about
open session, just very unfiltered, raw. Just say what you want, and we can edit afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go for it.
I've got a new question. Resetting. How can professionals better listen to young people? Because we've obviously got 3 wonderful professionals here with us, and well, we do have a professional. He is a professional. He is a big professional. But I think it would be interesting to hear what you think as a young person, not just a professional. He's the professional, so you're the young person for this question.
Sorry, what's the question? Proves my point.
How can professionals better listen to young?
Don't interrupt me. Because that's from experience where I also think, because I know you 3 don't do this, it feels really rude. But, like, you know, I've been in, this is going back a couple of years, but having, you know, when I was in year 12, having an assembly from the Metropolitan Police, just telling us that basically, because we were the only school literally within a 3-mile radius, that they were getting told that school kids were they're vandalising the Audi nearby, and actually they said my school didn't have a uniform, one of the only schools that didn't have a uniform, and they were coming in and having a go at us and whatever about it, and we're being very direct, but direct to the point where it was aggravating us. Because we were getting accused, like individual people were getting accused. It's not even just the professionals coming in. Also, teachers can be very, I don't know if this is a word, accusatory.
Accusatory.
Accusatory, there we go. But yeah, there's a lot of, all you need to do is just be kind, which I know these 3 are, and have a more of a, I hate to say soft approach, but it's true. If someone's going to come in a uniform and all that, it's just a bit annoying. But
This one's not always soft.
But what I was going to say, what I was going to say is actually that the police report for that incident was actually they were all dressed in school uniform, so the police had come to the wrong school. But it was also the fact that they were very harsh about it, but in their defence, they were trying to get a point across. They sometimes had to be scary for us to listen, because if you're scared, hopefully you're not going to do it. There are some people who would do it.
But how can they listen to you?
How do they listen to me?
As a young person, how did the professionals listen to you?
It depends who it is.
A TV channel.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just gave me a chance.
How didn't they listen?
How didn't they listen?
Yeah.
How did they not listen? They just didn't reply to my emails. Didn't reply to my emails. But yeah, because it took me 3 years to get through to our mayor at the time. 3 years. And sometimes they think we're out to cause no good. So, yeah. But these 3 are kind, and I don't care what anyone says about you, you are kind.
Okay, so how do you 3 as professionals listen to young people? What do you think you can do, or what do you think other professionals can do to better listen and better support young people?
You've hit the nail on the head with the word listen. And that I think that is key. That is the most important thing. I like to talk. Everybody knows I like to talk. But you know, I've been working with children and young people for more than 20 years now, and for me it is about listening. And sometimes even as a professional, I want to say something, I want to talk, because again, I like to talk. But it's not, because it's about being in that time and that space with the young person, allowing them to speak, listening to what they're saying and taking note of what they're saying and reacting in the way that you're supposed to. It's time, it's space, it's listening, it's making sure that it's not just listening, no, it's making sure that they know that they feel heard. And I think that that's the important part, because we all listen to some extent, but do we listen in a way that makes them feel heard, like their voice has been important?
Yeah, and made a difference. I mean, we can't do, as a drug education charity, we absolutely have to listen to young people, because otherwise how do we know that what we're going to be doing is useful, is relevant, is landing in the right way, and things change all the time. So one thing I'd say is find different ways to do that as well. So surveys are pretty classic and they're really useful, but everybody gets fed up with surveys. Can you create focus groups? I mean, we have a universal provision, so it's like very different from the kind of work that you're doing. Creating a youth forum so that you've got a sounding board. We've got youth ambassadors who are amazing, but young people, if you're working with young people and not listening to young people, you're trying to do what you're doing with an arm tied behind your back. You know, you're not going to be able to do what you do as well as you could and make the difference that you're presumably wanting to make if you're not listening to the young people that you're there to serve.
Yeah.
Again, it's a funny thing, and I'm going to use this kind of stoic kind of phrase, and it's if somebody comes to you to open up and to talk and they fail to do so, it's you, the listener, that's done the wrong. And it's this weird kind of paradoxical opposites dance. You know, the individual's already made the commitment psychologically to come and speak to you, and then they fail to talk about the particular subject in a vessel, in this instance, for them to just sound off to. But there's an awful lot going into that to get to that stage. You know, you have to lay the foundations and stuff of this nature. And again, you highlighted about sometimes not exactly being that ideal individual to speak to. A lot of my clients are individuals that want to do better, they want to change, and sometimes, if that's the case, you have to be prepared to listen to some rather horrible truths and recognize that at times we too can be the toxicity in our own lives. And at that point, you need to have that dialect at a position that you can transition and move forward, although it could seem quite confrontational. A lot of us can be quite guarded of our emotions and quite pig-headed in our position. We'll say, this is what I think and this is how it is. And it's certainly something that I adopted when I was young. Woe betide anybody that, regardless. So sometimes...
Still does.
Sometimes... a lot of my individuals, they require that kind of personality type. Sometimes, again, it's a weird thing, but softly isn't necessarily the way that's going to get through. You know, if somebody's lived a few years hardened on the estate doing rather nefarious and undesired things, it's not necessarily going to reach home. You know, if the person that's trying to bestow some advice or insight onto the behaviour with an absence of knowledge of it themselves, and I mean first-hand knowledge of what rather egregious behaviour looks like. You know,
Sorry. I was interrupting
No,
you.
no, go on.
Sorry.
Jump in there.
That's not what he just said we do. I'm so sorry.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, in terms of advice for professionals, you have to go into, if you're listening, really wanting to hear what young people are saying, you have to be prepared to hear things that you might not, that might criticise what you're doing, that might be really challenging. But you absolutely have to be open to that. And you don't have to take everything, you don't have to take on board everything, but if you're listening and really listening, you're not necessarily going to hear what you want to hear.
Well, I think last question before I think we open it up to the audience, I think. But what's one thing you wish you could have, or could tell your younger self, if you could? Now you're in your position where you are at now.
I didn't hear the question. Sorry. Sorry. What was the question again?
If you could say anything to your younger self, your position now, knowing what you know, and talking to that juvenile.
Oh, it'd be really easy if I had a conversation with myself. It would stop taking it so seriously. In yourself so seriously. You know? In a nutshell, the moment you kind of let go of the serious nature of it all and begin to realise that, hey, every opportunity is an opportunity to redo it again. You know, the biggest difference between a master and his pupil is the master has failed more times than the pupil has tried. There's nothing wrong with failure. There's nothing wrong with getting it wrong. Some of the greatest life lessons that you will ever learn will be from some of your greatest mistakes. Don't be afraid to make them.
I would say to my 15-year-old self, I think looking back, that year 11 year was not, I would not go back there.
I don't think any of us would.
I would just say, I think to my year 11 self, it'll be okay. This too will pass, you know. It will be okay. That's what I would want to know. And it was, roughly, generally, on the whole.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No?
I know. I think I would give myself a hug and tell myself to believe in what I did. And that's probably something that I still say to myself every single day. But I think it is that everything will be all right. Have a hug. It's all, you know, believe in yourself, because every day you're still learning, which I suppose reflects a little bit what you were saying. But every day you learn something different, and don't regret the things that you've experienced, because they make you into the person that you are.
Not that I'd say, because I'm still young, hopefully you all agree I'm still young. Not that I'd tell my younger self, but something I've learned now that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life, is that one thing I'd say, and I don't think people in the room would agree, but something I've taken for granted is my friends. Seriously, it's my friends. And you don't, with everyone going to uni, you don't realise how much and me starting a new job and everything, you don't realise when everyone goes their separate ways, the people who stay in touch, who want to meet up, who you just sometimes see in the street and you like haven't seen for ages, you're just like, and always check in on you. That's one thing I'm going to continue with, like, friends are always there. And funny enough, I have a weird, I don't know if you guys would agree, with friends, everyone's definition of a best friend or a friend is different. Everyone's expectations of a friend are different. Now, I'm not going to go into mine, but I have been told or too little or have a very particular stance on a friend. But again, it's more just when they're not there, it's just weird. And that's like, you know, I'd always, and one thing my sister told me was you have to put in the effort. If you don't put in the effort, then...
Well, it's that saying, isn't it? If you want what you've never had, you've got to be prepared to do what you've never done.
Exactly. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Wow, right. I think I can just about see most of you.
Kind of.
I might have to stand up, but does anybody have any questions for myself and Krish or any of the panel?
there you go.
Oh, hello.
Lovely.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to do a
here.
hands up basis. If anyone's got any questions, they could be from me, they could, I don't know, shoot away. Shoot away, guys. Please, someone have a question.
Is anyone going to be brave? Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
I'd like to ask all of you, what's maybe one thing that you've learned just from doing your afternoon tea podcast? Like, is there something someone said or something that's like stuck in your brains as you've done your episodes?
We're just going to repeat the question so people on the stream can hear.
People on the stream,
That was
yeah.
one thing, what, sorry?
One thing that
You
stands
have
out.
learned or that's stuck in your brain from doing your afternoon tea.
One thing that stood
That's
out.
a great question.
That's a very good question.
One thing that stood out or stuck with us
got
from
one for
afternoon
me
tea.
as a guest was kind of alluding to my point earlier on, the perception of a lack of depth that within the older generations, it's all very based, the outward look at the younger generations, it's all instant gratification. Maybe this group of individuals doing afternoon tea is that there is an anchoring, a penchant for wanting to receive better quality answers to their questions, and for me that was really insightful and uplifting, that there are individuals of a particular age that are asking more profound questions of the community and the people they're knocking about with. So for me that was a great insight.
Anything else? Anyone?
I'd like to know what the hosts
Us? Oh, okay.
have learned.
I mean,
you or me first. Go on.
I mean, I can go. I mean, I've learned so much. I mean, as you guys know, afternoon tea's my baby. It's something, you know, I curated and something I'm really passionate about. And I think I love picking at someone else's brain to know what they've gone through, what they know. I love knowing things. I love learning new things and continuing to learn. And like you said, it's that thing of you don't know what you don't know, right? And you know, I won't know it until I do that mistake or that fundamental, you know, thing that goes on. But if I now have a different perspective, different insights, different rationale to it, which maybe I've not even thought about or even acknowledged as such a way of thinking, you know. And I think particularly with when we talk to Wade with his episode coming out today, or is out, I mean, hearing about both sides of the manosphere and the men's mental health, and sort of hearing how it's not just men going through that, but it's also the females, the women who also have to get affected by those issues, and how it's not just a one-sided aspect of it all. I think that's my, you know, just thing.
I think I mentioned it in my episode, and the one thing that I already knew it before, but it's definitely something that afternoon tea has accentuated for me, is experience is everything.
100%. Yeah.
That is everything. Everybody has a different experience of the world. Everybody has a different experience with mental health. Everybody has a different opinion and experience with the police, with institutions, and individual experiences, I think, is one of the most important things that we need to understand when we talk. I think when we talk to other people, you need to understand that your experience is going to impact the conversation. I think you need to understand that other people's experiences will impact the conversation. It's just that's it really.
Communication.
Experience is everything, and no one should be ashamed of their own experience. I think we all have a story to tell, whether it be good or whether it be bad, whether there's, you know, there's bad things or there's good things in it. Our experiences are worth everything to us and to the people around us, the people we want to support, the people we want to work with. Experience is everything.
I've learned a new skill.
What's
and
that?
That is me not being able to be in charge of something for once.
Afternoon tea is our baby, okay?
Yeah, it's not mine. It's not mine. But being able to, you know, being able to, for, you know, going on 6 years is quite relaxing in myself. But also, you know, being able to allow other people like Krish, like Bells, to be able to do what they're passionate about is, yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, hello?
Hi.
What do you think of the support that is available locally?
That just for the live stream, that was, what support is available locally?
What do you think?
What do you think of the support that's available locally?
And do you think they're listening to you? Are you able to make an impact?
I think it's getting better. I think there's a lot more, I mean, organisations, people really trying to get their voice out there to really help these young people, you know. And I think being part of to all these different other organisations, you can see their heart is in the right place. It's just they need that proxy, they need that megaphone to really rave and shout about it. And I think that's where it's getting lost. I think there's those secret gardens everywhere dotted around, and those, you know, that calm within a storm, essentially. But they're not conveyed, they're not promoted maybe the best way, and I think that's the thing that's getting lost. I think there's a lot of help, I think there's a lot of people willing to help. It's just how to get that information to the young people, which I have seen from being within organisations, maybe not seen as a young person outside of the organisations, I think.
Well, I am still familiarising myself with a lot of the local support, and Almost to flip the question on its head, I think if you are unhappy with the support that is available, the best thing you can do is get involved. Go volunteer for the police. Go talk to your teachers. Go and, you know, fill out a Trustpilot review on a service, even if they have those. I don't know. Give your feedback, because at the end of the day, if what they're doing is to support and help you and hear your advice, they're going to want to hear your reviews. They are going to want to know how they can improve their system to be able to reach you.
I think there are some phenomenal services in Bedfordshire. I think that there are some fantastic charities, CICs, local organisations doing amazing work. I think that sustainability for all of them is a huge issue and huge concern. And I think that plays a part in people probably not knowing what services are there and what services they are able to access. I often get a lot that people don't know who Link to Change are. Well, unless you kind of know about child exploitation, then you're not going to know that we're there. You're not going to know that we exist. And amazing local youth clubs, and I speak to so many on a daily basis that are doing amazing work, but no one really knows about them. No one really shouts about them from the rooftops, because they're, you know, just something that's really small that have young people in the local community accessing. They're run by people within the community. But I don't think that people know that these services are there and these services exist, and I don't think that there's enough support in the system for any of these grassroots organisations, for any of these absolutely phenomenal services. And there should be a celebration, because there's so much out there that is really good and really strong and really worthwhile.
I mean, yeah. I think there's if you're going to take the aspect of the organisations and, you know, how they can get into schools and stuff like that. Obviously, we only had a 10-minute assembly once every other week, and you go to that assembly, you'd see, I don't know, the police were there, or, you know, for example, I didn't have an assembly with Bedford Given, but something like Bedford Given would come in and would tell us about what's going on. But then actually you sit next to your friend and go, and it only takes one person to go, oh, well, that's a load of rubbish, for then everyone else to agree, and no one else is going to actively say that because they don't want to cause an argument in the middle of everyone.
Isn't it? That you follow the leader, you're the part of the herd, just to go. Yeah. And as we know, word of mouth is the biggest marketing. Yes. You know, one person says it, domino effect, and hopefully it gets that chain reaction.
Is there any other questions? Oh, hello. Yes.
Carl, you mentioned neurological dexterity.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, how can we cultivate safe spaces within young people?
Just for the live stream, that was talking about neurological dexterity, and how can we cultivate safe spaces for young people through that.
What, to explore or expand on that practice? Or?
I guess just so that they can be their own safe spaces, so whatever that looks like.
Okay, well, one of the key first steps is by acceptance, and that's the first position you've got to take within oneself. It's about accepting what has been, where you're at, and what lie ahead of you. And that I can't control anything that Urban says or does, or anything that you say or do. And like I highlighted earlier on, there is the potential of either one of you saying something rather outlandish and rather hurtful. I can't guarantee that won't happen. But what I can do is develop the potential that could happen, and it's not necessarily happening to me in that moment, as developing the observation. As in, a lot of people identify through what they call personality through limitation, a personal perspective idea of who they are, give it a societal labeling or a condition, and they begin to identify through that particular remit. I liken it to a racehorse in this instance with blinkers on. It can only see what's in front of them. Now, the moment as we as individuals take those blinkers off, all of a sudden we can see a much greater field of vision. You know, this this one instance here isn't necessarily the only emotional response that I could harbour from the stimulation that happened outside of myself. You see? I then get to determine how I feel about this. And if you do feel a particular way, ask yourself why. It's the why behind our doing, the why behind our thinking, and the why behind our saying. The moment we begin to understand our expressions, is the way I'm interpreting this experience conducive, or is it regressive and keeping me in the position of victimhood through that particular happenstance? So it comes down to give the individual the environment and the skill set to develop those trains of thinking to analyze their own selves. You know, we live in a world of very, very, very a lot of selfies. Lots of people are doing selfies, but very few know anything about self. The moment we start to cultivate that, you begin to develop that dexterity that life can throw you.
That
100%.
was a heck of an answer.
I wanted to do this.
There's so many words in such a small space, but I think that is all we have time for today. Thanks for coming. I'll give you a round of applause. And thank you to the people watching our live stream. If you didn't catch this live, then it will be on YouTube. You can watch it later.
May I just say one thing? How, when we have a round of applause for the interpretation?
Yes, please. She's been absolutely amazing. She's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thank you guys for coming. Thank our little tech team over here as well.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, guys. I mean, this, I think, to me at least, it truly means a lot that you've taken the time to come here, audiences watching live, you know, and to listen to the podcasts when they've been posted. It's been quite of a journey for us. It's been a learning experience, and I've loved, I think, every bit of it pretty much. So, thank you so much, everyone.
The tea has been spilled. Season 1 wrapped.
Woo.
Is that everything?
Are we out, Oscar? Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks all for coming.
you.
I'm not going to make it say anymore. Thank you so much.